Let me know when we're good to go, Emily.
Okay, we are now live.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in to the East Lansing special meeting, a regular city council meeting on this Wednesday, July 29th. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Babcock.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Gregg.
Here.
Mayor Stevens.
Here. Next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. I will look for a motion on that.
I'll move that.
I'll second.
There we go. And it has been moved and seconded. Any discussion or changes? All right.
No.
Lisa, did you have something?
That was a no.
Okay. All those in favor of the agenda as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Seeing none, that passes unanimously. Our next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the regular city council special meeting from July 20th. Do I have a motion on that?
Moved.
I'll second.
Wonderful. It has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the item or questions or changes?
None.
All right. Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. All right. Moving on to our next item, which is communications. The first one is just an announcement that written communications received by the council are posted on the online agenda packet. So I did want to make a quick note that was pointed out to me by our clerk's office. So for the next couple of days when we have interview, meetings, our written communications are only posted at our regular discussion only meeting, regular city council meetings. So for the next 2 days when we do have interviews, those are discussion only meetings because no decision will be made at those. So there won't be written communication on those meetings, but everything that is sent to us will be compiled for Saturday's meeting as well. So you're going to see written communication on this meeting as well on the next one. Those who might be following discussion only versus regular city council might have known that, but for those who aren't, if you don't see written communication on the next 2 days, those are discussion only meetings, and that's why. Okay, next item is communications from the audience. Emily, please let anybody in.
Okay.
And I did want to note one more time that we did pass a rule a while ago to limit public comment to 5 minutes per person, and that timer will be on the screen.
Okay, the first caller is a caller ending in 963. Caller ending in 963, you are now permitted to address council.
Hi, this is Alice Dreger. A couple of suggestions. I realize things are moving quickly and are stressful and staff is dealing with a lot, but one suggestion I have is that on your published agendas on the portal that you actually include how to call in for public comment. A person would have to know to go to the electronic meetings page to find out how to call in for participation in the meeting. There's no information provided at the agenda on the portal, which is how you watch a meeting in terms of how to understand how to call in. So that's a problem. The second item is that there are these blank PDFs attached in the business agenda. This has become a habit of late. My feeling is that if you have nothing to attach, you should simply state that and make clear there is nothing meaningful that you're telling people. You're just entering what amounts to a blank item. It would be nice if, in fact, we did get a PDF attached that provided some explanation of what's going on. For example, discussion of emergency declaration and requirement to wear masks in downtown East Lansing. I suspect there's a lot of people who might like to weigh in on this, but there's no way for us at East Lansing Info to report what this even means because there is absolutely no information provided about what you're considering. And the same issue exists for item 3.4, discussion regarding appointing council members to negotiate city manager's contract renewal. The contract is not up until June of next year. So are you considering termination? Are you considering extension? Are you considering reduction of salary given economic problems? again, it would be nice to know just why this is on the agenda. It would also make a lot of sense to attach the city manager's current contract so that people could look at that as part of the agenda. When we have a development proposal before us, we attach material about the development proposal. So if something is significant enough to appear on the business agenda, I would suggest that logical attachments be included and some explanation of why it is on the agenda be included. Thank you. That's all. Thanks, Emily.
Thank you very much for that, and I agree. Having on the first point, having something on the portal to as to how to call in, I don't think would be too much of a difficulty, and if we could do that going forward, that'd be great. As to the agenda item reports, I do agree that more information is needed on those, and I apologize that, and maybe I'll take personal responsibility. This week has been a little bit hectic, and I know that that's not an excuse, but having these conversations, my goal is to have as many conversations in public as possible before if we make even when we're not making decisions, if we're just talking about things. And so I think that's why some items are discussion items, even on a regular city council. But I agree, there needs to be more information there, and I'll take personal responsibility for that in the future. So thank you for that comment. Emily, next caller.
That was the only caller.
Okay. Then we will move on to communications from the mayor and council members. Councilmember Babcock.
No general comments this week. Thank you.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I wanted to share an observation that I shared last night at the Council of Neighborhood Presidents meeting, just regarding our pool of candidates that have put their names forward for our vacant council member positions. I think that, as a fairly recently elected council member, most of what we are dealing with as really critical issues in the city right now are things that were not even a whisper during the last campaign. COVID did not exist. We now, obviously, we're living in a post-George Floyd world with the national conversation on race and equity that has sparked, which has become a huge part of what we have been working on. Neither one of those things, which are very big, intimidating issues, were part of that campaign. There was a lot more about tall buildings and zoning and, kind of day-to-day ruling city operations. So the fact that we've got not just 21 people, but 21 seemingly very qualified, passionate, dedicated people who are willing to jump into this pool knowing what they're in for is that's really been quite inspiring to me. I am not looking forward to having to make this choice, because I think it's going to be extremely difficult to come to a consensus on which of these two individuals we want to appoint. But I think we certainly don't have a problem of not having good candidates. So in terms of a hard choice, this is one that I look forward to making.
Thank you for that. And I suppose that puts it onto me, and I'll say some of the same. And I've got a couple of notes that I wanted to make in particular. So one, I just wanted to actually note that we just recently had the Crystal Awards in a very socially distant way outside Hannah Community Center with masks and just some invited folks, and that was live streamed. And I wanted to recognize those people at this council meeting, the recipients of those awards, names that probably many of the people that are watching here know because that's how involved they are in the community. But Ralph Monsma, Conrad Hittner, Megan Holland, and Ginger Ogilvie, and just really outstanding members of the community that have done so much. And speaking of people that do so much, I wanted to also note that our clerk's office right now is getting ready for an election next week. And they also have the unique pleasure of hosting about 4 public meetings just this week alone for the city council, and are going through a process, of verifying eligibility, for folks and really putting things together. And they just have a huge amount on their plate. And, you know, I've seen it firsthand, and that office is really phenomenal. And I just, you know, I want to mention just, I know everybody in the city is working really, really hard right now. And there's a lot of things going on. But I do want to mention that department in particular, because, you know, some of their headache is probably caused by us a little bit. So I did want to put that out there. So, you know, we're continuing to have conversations with Michigan State, the health department, some of our business community, you know, important issues in relation to COVID. You know, the work doesn't stop. And I said that about a week ago. But, you know, it is truer now than, you know, it even was 1 week ago. You know, myself, the city manager, a lot of great staff, and Councilmember Babcock and the Mayor Pro Tem rotating in and out have been meeting with MSU officials to frequently address, you know, outlying concerns going forward, whether that be in regards to testing, you know, off-campus activities or on-campus concerns. We have a lot coming down the pipeline that you guys are going to see soon. You know, that's I think the fruit of the labor of those conversations. But I am really glad that we're having difficult conversations now, so we don't have to have them under worse circumstances later down the line. And I just, you know, I want to thank MSU for being a partner in that. But I think that, you know, pushing a good agenda to make sure that the citizens of this community, whether they be students or residents, you know, that are here year round are safe. And so, you know, difficult conversations and a lot of meetings, but it is all very, very important. And I think we're going to talk about one of the measures today, but a lot more stuff coming down the pipeline. And then I will talk very briefly, because I'm going to talk about it probably when we get to the item about folks that applied to the vacant positions. And I think Councilmember Gregg, you know, hit the nail on the head when she was talking about, you know, the issues that we're dealing with now, you know, couldn't have been conceived a year ago. And, you know, there's a lot of work that's been going on in space of equity and, you know, inclusion in the city of East Lansing for many, many years. But, you know, the challenges with COVID and, you know, really, you know, all the development that we're seeing in the city of East Lansing that's continuing, you know, present a lot of great opportunities, but also a lot of challenges that we need to address. And so, you know, the amount of responses that we got and the caliber of those candidates, I mean, that's East Lansing. That's East Lansing. An ideology of change moving forward and a community that takes a call to action and runs with it. As you know, some of you know, we've been in a lot of meetings recently, but I made an effort to call every single eligible candidate, not to give them any of my opinions on you know, on their eligibility or them as a candidate, but just really to thank them for stepping up to the plate and attempting to take on a role that, you know, public service sometimes is a thankless job. And, you know, to put your hat in the ring is to say, I want to step into a situation where there's going to be a lot of challenges and I'm going to devote a lot of time to it. So that in itself deserves gratitude. And so I have an immense amount of respect for all of those people. And really, you know, I never lost faith that we would have incredible people, you know, showing up, but this reaffirmed it. And so I'm so proud to be part of this city. I'm so proud. And this is going to be a really difficult decision going forward, but it fills me with pride. Reading through those names, reading through the experiences of some of those folks and all those folks saying, I'm ready to take that next step. So thank you to everybody that did apply. Thank you to everybody that's reaching out right now, giving their opinions on what you want to see. It's really, really important. Something I touched on the Council of Neighborhood Presidents yesterday and continue to touch on. We've got a lot of opportunity for public comment in the next couple of days. And I definitely encourage folks to chime in. So thank you very much. And I will get off my soapbox and we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is our business agenda, item 3.1, discussion of emergency declaration and requirements to wear masks in downtown East Lansing. And I will hand that over to the city manager. Sir, you're muted.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Mayor. So as you mentioned, the city has been actively engaged with MSU, public health, responsible hospitality, in working in a number of different areas to make sure that we're making the return of students as safe as possible. So one of those areas of discussion have been the downtown and what we can do to make the downtown safer. On June 30th, City Council passed Ordinance 1488, Ordinance 1488 essentially allows the city council to, in addition to declaring an emergency, issue additional orders or rules or regulations along with that emergency that would regulate the public right-of-way or public land. So after pretty extensive discussions with staff internally and with the group that we talked about working for the safe return for students, we are recommending that the city council declare an emergency and then use that ability to put a rule in place requiring the use of masks in the downtown. So the reason we want to do this is pretty obvious. Right now, if you walk through downtown, which I do on a regular basis, you see that there aren't any crowds. It's actually pretty thin in terms of pedestrian activity. So it doesn't feel like people are bumping into each other continuously. But if you have a situation where we have thousands of students coming back to downtown August 15th and beyond, it's a situation where we really want to make sure that people are as safe as possible in the downtown area. So that's the recommendation. It's a simple recommendation. The wearing of masks, we've heard from the CDC, is one of the easiest ways that people can stay safe and stop the spread of COVID. So that's the recommendation, is that the mayor essentially issue this declaration with the requirement to wear masks in the downtown, that he would take that action if he decides to prior to the August 11th meeting. And then within 7 days of taking that action, council would have to act to reaffirm that decision. So at August 11th, our view would be that council would reaffirm that, which would then be in time to have it in place essentially well before the large majority of students come back. And we can anticipate from August 1 on, there will be a ramping up of student activity in the downtown. But I think that anytime doing it beyond August 5 would be advisable for us. So we wanted to have that discussion here with council and hear your thoughts on it. But obviously there's been some discussion all around this item nationally, but also locally as well. So any questions council might have or discussion on that item?
Sure, really quickly before I get to other council members. George, I'm going to request, I think actually the public comment there was apt. If we could get a memo on this put on the agenda, even if it is after the meeting, I think that would be apt, just to if folks are looking it up to get informed. And Councilmember Greg, or sorry, Mayor Pro Tem Greg, did you have a question?
I did have one question. I think I have been sitting in on the reopening committee meetings, and I think that, the idea of masks in the downtown, we're kind of anticipating a period where distancing will not be possible because there will be large groups of people, right? And so what we've seen with lines and other crowd situations downtown is that people are not self-regulating. So like under our executive order, people are supposed to wear masks in situations where distancing is impossible. And we've just seen that that's not happening. People aren't kind of self-identifying those situations and saying like, oh, it's getting pretty crowded, better put my mask on. So I think, although I'm still not super enthusiastic about this, I think that I do see the wisdom in it, in the idea of having kind of a continual flow between our downtown and campus, so that there's the same rule on each side. But before, kind of tangential to that, I know that we've been having conversations with members of the Responsible Hospitality Commission regarding lines outside at restaurants. And I was just wondering if there's been, I know we've heard from some business owners that they have technological solutions for managing their lines, where there will be an app or there will be some sort of way of identifying people when there's space for them to come into these businesses that are all still operating at reduced capacity. But has there been kind of a general commitment from bars to address lines, or is that something that we're going to have to address as well?
So if that's to me, my understanding is that they're supposed to be free of lines and have virtual lines waiting in cars. So with their commitment to the masks, I understood that their commitment was also to not have lines outside their establishments. Okay,
because I think I'll sign on with masks in the full downtown district if we can also address the lines on the sidewalk. And so if the businesses are going to self-regulate that, which would really be my preference, because I think they have the most sway with their own patrons, then that's great. So
yeah, and just as a side note, in the past, city council meetings, I think this is more of a thing for this council, but we could always in the future in August, maybe have some RHC representatives, maybe Mike Kruger, like at the table, to kind of ask some questions too. I did hear, one point from a business owner the other day about, if MSU goes forward with holding sports during the day, moving our businesses, or encouraging businesses to do basically a reservation only on those days, that they'll probably have a lot of high traffic. That might mitigate some of the line concerns. And I heard that kind of directly from a business owner that had some concerns about this. So maybe that's a conversation that the RHC could have. Although I would kind of adhere to the wisdom of those folks that are running the businesses to know what the best way to move forward is. Councilmember Babcock, did you have anything?
No, I think that's a good idea. I think that I'm really encouraged to hear that we're getting more commitments about a mask zone from the county and from the university. Part of that could be cultural. They could be saying, yes, we hear you. And in government, we tend to want to hear, yes, absolutely, let's do it now. So that could be a cultural difference. But I am glad to hear what we've heard. In the best of all possible worlds, of course, we wouldn't need this. But as my beloved high school English teacher once said, laws are made for the lowest common denominator. So there's always going to be that 7% that needs a law.
Yeah.
So just a quick question for Mayor Pro Tem. Are you intending that we put this into the order to have no lines, or are you understanding that the RHC and the governor's order is sufficient in that regard?
I feel that the governor's order regarding waiting areas is sufficient to that, but just we saw that it wasn't being enforced and was kind of, there was sort of a throwing up of hands and saying, well, can't do anything about that. So if that culture has kind of shifted, then I don't think we need to explicitly say that. But if it ends up not actually being enforced, people have to revisit that.
So George, would you mind touching on, so MSU is doing, for their, quote unquote enforcement on campus and encouraging folks to wear masks and informing people of their rules. They're doing an ambassador program. Can you talk to us about, what this would look like in downtown and how we would, show or, inform people that this is now the rule, and kind of, put that accountability there?
Yeah, so the first thing is going to be just passive, putting signs into the entries of the downtown saying it's a mask required zone. So I would envision putting signs in all the entry points to the downtown. We also want to hire downtown ambassadors, and we have a sort of group identified at this point already to have people on busy days in August and into September. You could imagine Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights having ambassadors wearing a shirt that identifies them as an East Lansing downtown ambassador, that they're reminding people to wear masks, encouraging it, handing out masks for free to people that don't have masks. So all of those activities and coming from different directions to make sure that we're doing the best we can to have people actually comply. We've talked from council that enforcement in terms of police walking up to people is not exactly what we want. So that's why the idea of the ambassadors and having it be a peer-to-peer type activity, encouraging people to comply with the order.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And if we could get some kind of written explanation of that, I know that's kind of in preliminary stages, but at maybe our August 11th meeting, I think that'd be great. Yeah. So does anybody have any other questions kind of on this moving forward?
Can we just, what's the timeline? So the mechanism is that Mayor Stevens needs to declare an emergency, and then desire to create a mask zone, or does after the emergency is clear?
Mayor Pro Tem, I think you're breaking up just a little bit.
I think you start over now.
Okay.
Go ahead and say it again.
So I just want to make sure that the timeline and the mechanism that this is that I understand this. So the mayor has to declare a state of emergency, and then part of that declaration of emergency is a mandate to wear masks within our DDA district downtown. I'm assuming that we're talking about, and I'm assuming when we say downtown, we're talking about the DDA district, so all the way out to Harrison or Hagedorn.
Yes, that's our intent.
And then within 7 days of that declaration, we need to affirm that at a council meeting with a vote. Okay.
You went back out again, but within 7 days, we'd have to come back to council and have council affirm that decision to continue the emergency declaration. And so if we pass it by August 5th or beyond, but before August 11th, that gives us a chance to come back and have it reaffirmed by council.
Okay.
That answers, yes.
Yep.
Okay, that makes sense. And again, if we could just have something written up on this and posted on that agenda, I think that'd be great. Thank you, sir. Okay, I will move us on.
Hello?
What was that? Okay, I will move us on to our next item on the agenda, which is an item that I'm sure a lot of people are tuning in for, the selection of candidates to interview. So I'm gonna preface this item by saying, and we said this in a city release. So my original goal, honestly, was to try to interview everybody that was eligible. And given the volume of candidates that we had apply, it is unfortunately it's just not feasible to do that. And with the timeline that we have by a charter and truthfully the timeline required to have a full interview with I think real questions to get real answers. And so what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about candidates to interview, trying to call that list a little bit down. And then George, actually, you want to talk about the process for after this meeting when we do.
Yeah, so you mean in terms of notifying selected candidates and so on? Yeah, so after council lets us know your established list of who you want to speak to, if it's 10 people, if it's 12 people, your assistant Emily will email all of those people directly after the meeting with a sort of doodle online poll to show where people want to schedule themselves in, either tomorrow night or Friday morning. After people have scheduled themselves in, that email will also contain information on the questions that you finally select during this meeting. So people will know when they're scheduled in. They will also know what questions they're going to be asked. And also tomorrow, if we don't have responses from people, your assistant will also be calling people to make sure that they're slotted in one of the interview spots. So hopefully by mid tomorrow morning or late tomorrow morning, we'll have every person scheduled that you selected either tomorrow night or Friday morning for interviews. So
beautiful, thank you. So again, this is a strange structure because this has never happened before. So basically what the city manager had suggested and what I think other folks on council were comfortable with was everybody makes their own assessments based on the applications that we received. And then we all separately came to a conclusion about who we would like to see interviewed. And I'm sure there's going to be some overlap during this conversation, but this is a very public conversation on this because we're going to be talking about our thought processes and a lot of other things and basically naming out who, we think, should get an interview. And again, before we get into this, I just want to say the caliber of candidates that we received was phenomenal. And the truth of the matter is that, I would say this process is probably, if not the most, one of the most difficult decisions and processes of my career. And I just want to give kudos to everybody that did apply and just know that you're appreciated. And that's why I wanted to call everybody and thank them on a personal level for that. So I will shift it over to Lisa because she's raising her hand, and we will keep.
I was waiting until we got to the agenda item to say that, but we could seat every single person who has applied, and they would all bring something to the table. And as Aaron said, it's just amazing to live in a community where you get this kind of response, both by number and by talent. And I genuinely thank you all. Even before we saw the applications, I think I told East Lansing Info that I was already regretting having to choose only two. And that has only increased. So thank you all. And here goes, right?
Yep. And just as a side note, we have a lot of great commissions in the city of East Lansing, vacancies on those, different ways to serve. We have the Emerging Leaders Program. I'll say a lot of people that applied have already gone through that program. So there's a lot of really great ways to serve as well, if not on the council. Lisa, go ahead.
I would also say a lot of people, maybe it's the nature of the community, keep your eyes out for school board, because I saw some of you who would be superb on the school board, and many other organizations. Of course, they're all connected. They all know that, but it's an embarrassment of riches. That's all.
So I will shift it over then. Councilmember Babcock or Mayor Pro Tem, do you want to go through who you had selected that you wanted to see interviewed and your thought process behind those names?
Come on, you're the Mayor Pro Tem, go.
Nobody wants to go first.
I get the privilege of calling you out on it. So
yeah, noted. Okay, I'm just gonna go through. So I've got my little, I am still a paper person, so I printed everything out so that I could highlight their applications and everything. And I think that reading through all the names, the two kind of significant factors that played into my position or my decision was experience within the city of East Lansing. So I kind of heavily weighted people who were either currently serving on our commissions, had a history of serving on our commissions, also faces that I recognize from coming to comment at council meetings, because I know they're already paying attention to what's happening. And so I expect them to have a little greater knowledge. And then I've got a few candidates that just had relevant professional experience that really seemed, although they might not have yet had the opportunity to become deeply involved with East Lansing, they had life experience that I felt would be relevant to the council. And I just, I know like we're all using superlative adjectives here tonight. So I've got a list of 8 people, which means that there's, 13 great candidates left on the table. And I don't, although obviously there's going to be an element of rejection to the people that didn't make my personal list, I just want to say to everyone who applied that, your passion and your interest in public service is inspirational to me. And as Lisa has mentioned, there are other avenues to public service. I'm not sure, I don't know the campaign finance laws, but I'm fairly sure you could declare your campaign committee right now and start fundraising. So we're gonna have an election in 18 months. So I strongly encourage anybody that did not make the list to not consider that to be a rejection of your talent, but rather just the circumstance that is before us. So I'm just going to go alphabetically because it's easy. So I have Adam DeLay on my list. I have Basil Taylor, Chuck Grigsby, Dana Watson, Daniel Bowman, Nicole Bieber, possibly Bieber, Peter Dewan, and Ron Bacon are my 8 choices for interviewees.
Okay. I have those written down here, but Councilmember Babcock, you have any?
Yes, I looked at a couple of factors. I looked at faces we don't currently have on the school or on the school board, on the city council, both as far as representing walks of life. It is a point well taken that I believe it was Ms. Young that I didn't mention senior citizens, and I am gravely remiss because I can't imagine the city council in East Lansing or anything in East Lansing running without our senior citizens. And you're right, I didn't mention it in that. I guess I always assumed that we'd have that constituency, and we welcome that constituency. I was looking not just at boards and commissions, I was looking more at the larger background, perhaps people who've done things that didn't necessarily slot into boards and commissions. That didn't work against anyone, but I also looked beyond that. So I would say, moving alphabetically again, I've got paper and a different computer screen, so I'm sorry if it looks like I'm looking all over the place here. All right, Mr. Daniel Bowman, Ms. Janelle Cannon, Mr. Peter Dewan, Mr. Chuck Grigsby, Mr. John Monberg, Ms. Dana Watson, and then Ms. Nicole Bieber, and this is not a dramatic pause. My paper is overrunning my life. Mr. Andrew Newman, thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that. And I think I have everybody's things down. Now I will go through my process and my reasoning. So I broke this down. And if you look behind me, I've got giant papers because I have been papering this office, trying to put my process down onto big old sheets of paper. But basically, I broke it down into 4 categories. So active community involvement, background in city work and city services or public service, and that's through commissions or other work, their career or education, expertise in certain areas that would be relevant to the city, and then their commitment to equity. And those were my kind of 4 standards. And then there were other considerations as well, of course. And I think I wrapped in most of that, but valuing those that have a perspective that we don't necessarily have in the city council right now. Those who received strong public comment, that kind of thing. And so that is how I ended up with this list. And this is in no particular order. I do not have it in alphabetical. It's literally just in how the stack of applications were. So the list that I have is Chuck Grigsby, Dana Watson, Daniel Bowman, Peter Dewan, Rod Murphy, Nicole Bieber, Jennifer Carrera, and Ron Bacon. And that is my list. And I am attempting, as we were doing this, to go through and figure out where the similarities are. And I imagine city manager probably is as well.
You said the names really fast. But
sorry, I will.
Two of you said the names so fast, I didn't get the list. Lisa gets the award for saying the list very slowly.
Yes,
So
I will say
her calm reading voice.
I will say that one more time in Lisa tone. Chuck Grigsby, Dana Watson, Daniel Bowman, Peter Dewan, Rod Murphy, Nicole Bieber, Jennifer Carrera, and Ron Bacon.
Great.
And so I'm seeing, a good amount of overlap in the lists, and some folks that are not. Can you, George, do you have, I'm trying to calculate it right now, but how many individual names are listed there?
I need Jesse to go back through and try one more time.
Okay.
Yep, no problem. Adam DeLay, Bazil Taylor, Chuck Grigsby, Dana Watson, Daniel Bowman, Nicole Bieber, Peter Dewan, and Ron Bacon.
So if I could just say that it looks to me like Grigsby, Watson, Bowman, Bieber, and Dewan all got was on everyone's list?
Yep.
Can you guys confirm that those 5
Yes.
are on everyone's list?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry,
So those,
one more time. Who was that? Those names?
Grigsby, Watson, Bowman, Bieber, and Dewan.
Okay.
Is that that should be on everybody's list?
Yes.
So those are the first 5 selections then, just by the numbers. Let me see if I'm missing anybody. I don't believe I'm missing anybody who was on all 3 lists.
No.
And then we would go down to people who are on 2 lists as a way of just getting to people who have multiple selections.
The only one I see is Ron Bacon.
Bacon is on 2.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
So by my count, we have 13 individual names.
So the question then is, does council want to, let me go back and count one time. 1, 2. Yeah, so you're at 13. Do you want to do 13 or do you want to get down to 12 or 10?
I personally am fine with 13 and extending one of those meetings another half hour if necessary. I think that cuts the list almost basically in half, and
Yes.
I
That
think
works for me.
Agreed.
Okay.
I've got my microphone now. Agreed. I can say it.
wonderful. That is much better.
Well,
No
that's-
more pantomiming through meetings.
And to make sure I have the exact same list as everybody else, at the conclusion of the meeting, if everyone could email me your 8 names to me and to Emily, and then we've cross-referenced to make sure we have the exact same names you have, because everyone on your list then will be getting an interview.
Okay.
Right.
Understood. Thank you very much, City Manager. So, and I want to say this again. This was not easy. This is just the first step. We only have 2 spots, out of these folks, and I cannot explain just like how many back and forth conversations I had with myself on different areas of expertise, different areas of education, what would be useful for the council, and what perspectives we needed, and hearing from the community on what they wanted to see, and I just, again, I cannot express my gratitude enough for those folks that decided to step up and say, I want a role. So for those who are getting interviewed and those who might not be moving forward in that process, again, I just want to say thank you. This is a tough decision that we have in front of us. But we've got really, really big challenges moving forward. And I know that we're gonna go forward with great people no matter what. And honestly, anybody that applied on here, I think would be great in public service. So I do encourage folks, run for office,
Please.
run a commission. We've got a lot of things in the city, emerging leaders programs, different community organizations that are doing a lot of really, really good things for the city and the greater Lansing region as a whole. And a lot of these people on this list already had a lot of that under their belt. But for those still looking to get involved, there are many, many ways to do that. And this is going to be a really challenging process going forward, going through interviews, but I encourage everybody to tune into that process. And again, I want to thank everybody that did apply, because I know that putting yourself out there, especially in terms of public service, is a difficult thing to do. So thank you very much for those. And with that, I will move us on to the next item on the agenda, which is discussion of establishing questions for City Councilmember appointments. And I want to really quickly move us towards George, just to kind of talk through how long those interviews are going to be. So like where we should be at in terms of amount of questions, time to answer, that kind of thing. So we know procedurally kind of how to move forward.
So in the sort of need to be efficient with time, we discovered or thought that perhaps a half hour full from beginning to end is a good time period, which would give people 25 minutes of time to portion to answer questions. That also gives people time to situate a new candidate, make sure they're on the line, make sure their sound is working, and then go to the next candidate. So 25-minute timed interviews are what we thought would be useful. Of course, that's for council to decide. And at that point, you could establish that somewhere in the range of 6 questions would be within reason. That gives people enough time to give an answer with some depth, but not spending 5 or 6 minutes on a question. You've got to be 3 or 4 minutes on a question. If people are concise and you want to have more information, perhaps you could go to 7 questions, but that gets a little bit tight in terms of the answers. So what I would recommend is that you have a list of questions as a script, and that all the council members go through just like a job interview, one at a time, each asking them the next question, and that you just ask the question as it's written down to give everyone a fair same shot at the questions, and that you time them again so that we're giving everyone a fair shot to have the same amount of time before the public answering those questions. So really it's then for council to look through the list of proposed questions or come up with new ones. And there's many, many questions here on a broad range of topics. And to not just give us the questions, but also the order of those questions would be helpful. And I think that's probably a good way to proceed.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll move into the item that's on our agenda here. And then I had a couple of questions written down. I just want to say that, some of the questions that are being suggested by members of the community were really, really apt. I'm going to point to just one in particular, just because I had a conversation with Ray Vlassen about it earlier today. And actually one of the questions that I want to see on the interview, so to speak, if the rest of council agrees with me, and they might not, and that's okay. But he had said, if asked to be a liaison to 2 of East Lansing commissions, which one would you select and why? And it was one of those questions where I didn't think about it like that before, because you think about what, you ask what your priorities are, but specifically, we are, members of, we are liaisons to different commissions that deal with different issue areas. And I was, I read that and I was like, that is very apt, because that shows where priorities are and what issue areas, you want to take on. So anyway, so we'll get into it. And I'll go to Councilmember Babcock first, and then I'll go to the Mayor Pro Tem, and we'll have an open discussion about this.
Okay, do you want me to identify which questions I'd prefer to ask, or I'm a little hazy?
Yeah, so if you could go ahead and, the city manager had said 6 questions. So if you don't have 6 questions that you want to ask, that's fine. But the questions that you want to see on the interview, if you could list those out, I'll write them down that you're writing, and I'm sure the city manager will as well. And that's based on obviously what we've heard from the public, and also, what you want to see out of the questions. And then once we get everybody's down, we'll go through and we'll see if we can consolidate.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I'm looking off screen because I'm trying to pull it up on my computer. So okay. I apologize. Actually, while I do that, do you want to just switch to the Mayor Pro Tem while I try to drag this back onto my screen?
Go ahead.
Sorry, Jesse.
You're assuming that I'm more prepared than you are. I feel like that's a big assumption to make. Just reading through the list of the proposed questions that Emily sent us, you can kind of pool them into some groups, right? Some questions are already aligned. So there seems to be a contingent of questions around race and equity, anti-racism, inclusion. There was some version of what is the most important issue facing East Lansing. Yep. There's a couple different variations of that. One person said 2, one person said 3. I think that, to me, like just kind of thinking about the work that we're doing right now, there is definitely a big equity realignment happening. We have the COVID response. So I think we definitely have to, talk about that in some way. But then also we have just kind of the underlying issues of East Lansing. We have our, pension liability is not under control yet. We thought we had made some headway with the income tax. We didn't know that COVID was going to dry up like every budget that we had. So that is still definitely a big thing going forward. And then we've got some pretty major development happening. We still have got interest in development. And it's very likely that there's going to be, we know the ones that are coming, but there's probably going to be more as well. And then environmental policy was the other one that I saw represented in these questions. So I think if we're gonna ask 5 or 6 questions, aligning them with kind of our major issues would be my preferred format. I think it's also I think it would also be good to leave one that's kind of an open question of just like, tell us about yourself and why you want to do this. Because I think, we want to give them an opportunity to represent anything that they did not have a chance to talk about in our questions. Oh, and the other thing that has come up several times that I think we definitely need to acknowledge is the time commitment and the understanding that people are signing up for something that will take a lot of hours and that they are ready to do that. So I don't have clear questions formatted, but I think that that's kind of my preference, is about 4 questions that align with the major issues that are happening in East Lansing, 1 question that's kind of open-ended, and then, an acknowledgement that they're signing up for something that's pretty weighty.
Sure. So, one comment on, no, yeah, go ahead, George.
I was going to say, so if you want me to help sort of kick it off, at the start of the staff suggested questions is one that Jesse just mentioned, which is tell us your background. And it's a good one to start out with because it's a good general question. If people are watching and haven't had a chance to review people's resumes, it gives a chance for the candidate to tell about yourself as it relates to the position. So your background, your education, your work and volunteer experience as it relates to this position, which people, of course, a broad range of activities can relate to that. So, and it's a good one to start out with because it lets the candidate introduce themselves essentially to you and the community. So along the lines that Jesse said, if that's maybe one you want to start with, it's an easy intro. We use it a lot for our own questions in the city. So just a thought.
Lisa, go ahead.
Thank you. I would follow that with a question submitted by Mr. Vlassen, which is, could you please share with us your reasons for being an applicant?
Mhm.
And then I'd segue into question 3, which volleys back to some of the staff suggested questions. If appointed, what would you like to accomplish over the next year? And then actually, if I go for a 4, I'd go back to Mr. Vlassen and the liaison question.
So one thing that I'm noticing, Jesse, in your comments, I think you talked about budget decisions, pension liabilities, development, and environmental policy. And I do think that those are all very, they're specific policy questions. And maybe it could be more suited to have, I do believe that there should be a question on equity and inclusion. And I had one drafted for that. That's not exactly what some of the other folks have submitted, but if we want to change that around, that's okay as well. But my opinion was kind of under the frame of, I'll state this and then we can get into, I guess, further discussion. So, to tell us about your background and why you want to serve. What do you believe is necessary to intentionally address issues of equity and inclusion within our community? And how does your past experience inform your commitment in this area? I said, what do you believe are the 3 most pressing concerns to the community of East Lansing? I also put a question in there that said, what steps can the city take to strengthen its partnership with regional stakeholders like Michigan State University, City of Lansing, Ingham County, Lansing Township, Meridian, and other community partners? I think a regional approach, especially during all this, is apt. And then I did have something, Ann Hill suggested, something specifically about finance. And I think, Jesse, you mentioned it as well, our budget. And Lisa, I'll get to you in 1 second. And I had said, do you have an experience in public finance or reviewing, implementing, or tracking budgets? It's a very general question. I'm down to have a better conversation on that if we want to just go through issues. And I did think, would you seek re-election in 2021 if you were appointed to the city council for a partial term? Or, even a subsect of that question. So it's more of a variation saying, would you consider, I'm okay with that. You don't want to commit somebody to doing it. But really just because, you're talking about longevity, you're talking about a really difficult job that, I think that if you're appointing folks, we should think about, ability to serve in the future. So I don't think it makes the decision, but I thought it was an interesting question. And then I mentioned this before, but I really did like the question on if asked to be a liaison to 2 of East Lansing commissions, which ones would you select and why, for the reasons I listed before. So we've got a lot of opinions on this. Lisa, I'm gonna head it over to you because you raised your hand before.
Well, I was also seconding your thought. Ms. Hill suggested, what experience do you have with budgets and financial statements? And I agree with you there, Mr. Mayor. And I also agree with you on what steps can the city take to strengthen its partnership regional. I have a slightly different take on asking about whether someone would run for office. And again, part of this is not everybody who's good at running for office is good at holding office, and not everybody who's good at holding office is good at running for office. And I think we all immediately have some examples that jump to mind, but particularly as we look to encourage people who, at least I think we've all encouraged people to apply who may not be comfortable, one reason or another, may feel that they cannot or should not run a citywide campaign. Physical disabilities is certainly a factor.
Sure.
Any other concern. So for that reason, I am not at all wedded to asking whether they're going to run in a few years. If somebody were to say no or yes, it wouldn't sway me either way.
Yeah,
So I don't know the use
fair.
of the question.
That's actually very fair. I mean, you know, and I agree with you. I mean, this is, you know, a process that is, you know, not the easiest, because of course we have, you know, we're basically saying we're going to pick people that are normally elected by the public. And yeah, I agree with you. You know, it also presents kind of an opportunity for folks that, you know, might not be able to run a camp. I mean, it's a very time intensive process, and it's difficult.
Physically draining. Yeah.
And, you know, there are real world, you know, and inclusion reasons why folks can't run a campaign, as you mentioned. So yeah, that makes some sense to me. I'd be willing to take that off the table. Jesse, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, the other kind of recurring theme that I saw in the questions that we haven't talked yet about is there was a lot of questions around people's approach to making difficult decisions.
Sure.
And I think I'm not exactly sure how to phrase it to really get to the crux of what we're asking there. But I mean, we are asked to make difficult decisions, and we're often asked to make decisions where we don't necessarily feel like there's a great solution, right? Like sometimes we're picking between two choices that we don't necessarily love. Sometimes things just sail through and there's no question about it, but I think it is emotionally draining, and it's definitely part of the work of council to go through that kind of stuff. So I think something about people's approach to maybe teamwork, where you know, where there's not going to be an agreement, how they work in collaboration with people that they don't necessarily agree with, or how they approach difficult decisions. Let me see. I think there was one here that phrased it fairly well. Let me see. I did like Ray Vlassen's question about what would you do to fully understand an important East Lansing community issue before you undertake city council action regarding it. I think that kind of touches a little bit about what I'm feeling here. Okay, I will continue to foment my thoughts there.
Okay.
Somebody else has a comment to move on.
So, you know, from my notes on this conversation so far, and I think George is also taking notes as well, but, you know, I think we're all in agreement for, you know, giving a reason why applying, and what you would like to accomplish. I think, and can I get a head nod or some kind of consensus that a first question on reason for applying, and George, maybe I'll give you a couple of seconds, but I think staff did have a good wording of that. But it was more, you know, it was just background education. And the second question there was interested in serving. What are folks' opinions on having those kind of combined in the same question, or do you think that those need to be separate?
I think that's fine in the same question.
I think that's fine.
George, what's your opinion on that? You're an HR professor. You're muted.
Sorry, I was muted. It was really great what I just said, so I'm sorry I missed it. Sorry. So do you want me to go through and sort of see what I have from the synthesis of your items, and maybe that would help? I wish I had a
Yeah,
whiteboard.
sure.
I wish I had a whiteboard here and I could be scribbling for
Yeah,
you.
you and me both, man.
So tell us about your background, which is the background, work, education, experiences. Why do you want to serve the East Lansing City Council, on the East Lansing City Council? What are the 3 most pressing concerns facing the city? If asked to serve as a liaison to boards and commissions, what 2 would you select and why? What is your familiarity with budgets and public finance? And what would you do to fully understand important EL community issues before undertaking council action? So those were kind of, I was trying to write quickly while you guys were agreeing with each other. And I took off the re-election of 2021, and I took off, I think that was it. I took off another one too.
So I think one question that I would like in there, and I don't know where I guess to put it, is a conversation or a question about equity specifically. You know, and again, I had wrote something that I tried to, you know, create in the frame of some of the comments that we got from the public, but also, you know, that just kind of addresses the issue overall, because of course, you know, there are a number of different conversations you can have about equity in the community.
How
But
about speak to us about what your view of race and equity is, and why is it important to local government? Something like that. Give us your view of race and equity and why it's important to local government, or important principle for local government. Let me just write.
let me look at the one that I had written. I just want to put it out there for members of the public that are watching. I mean, this is just as public a discussion as it gets. You know, we're just, you know, going through and giving opinions and kind of just having an open conversation about this, really.
Yeah, you're watching us think in real time.
It may not be pretty, it's not good TV, but it's the real deal, folks. It's like reality TV with city council. God, no.
So this is what I had written on an equity question, and then I'll ask council members to chime in if they think it's too much or too little, or if it needs to be in a different view. So George, what I had written was, what do you believe is necessary to intentionally address issues of equity and inclusion within our community, and how does your past experience inform your commitment in this area?
I was actually just reading that question off the question list, and I thought that it was good. So that suits my purposes.
Lisa?
I might change that a bit to say, tell us about an experience in your life when you have been asked, when you have addressed equity, and how that would inform your city council decisions. Or is that getting too abstract?
I think it might be, you know, I think that like what I really wanted to get to is like what the philosophy moving forward of somebody on the council would be. I mean, you know, that's why I added that, you know, thing at the end about past experience informing, just so, you know, give an opportunity to speak to what they've done so far in terms of that work. But, you know, I wanted to kind of say, you know, what do you believe is necessary to intentionally address, so I could, you know, maybe get a sense of policy or like, you know, of opinions of things that we need to change, you know, in East Lansing to move towards that. But again, I'm open to, go ahead.
Is that so that's the question on the bottom of page 2. What do you believe is necessary to intentionally address? And then saying at the end you added, and what have you done to further it? What was your add to the end of that?
No. The add to the end of that was, how does your past experience inform your commitment in this area? It's part of that question.
Okay, so sorry, the full question is there, what you want. That's what you want. Okay.
If other council members are okay with that as the quote unquote equity question.
I am. I think that's good. I think one of the things that what someone has done in the past is not, it's informative. It's not dispositive. It informs how people would respond. But I think your question is well done.
Okay. And then that would, if we asked, so far George listed out to tell us about your background and work experience as it relates to serving. Why do you want to serve? 3 most pressing concerns: the commission question, budget and public finance, your decision-making process. And now this equity question would then be 7 questions, and we want to get that down to 6. So
I think you can do 7. Let me just see if I think I might have one extra in here that I didn't pull out that you might have. So tell us about your background as 1. Why do you want to serve? 2, 3. What are the 3 most pressing issues? 4, if asked to serve as a board and commission, which 2 would you select and why? 5, familiarity with budget and public finance. 6, what would you do to fully understand an important EL community issue before undertaking council action? Did you want to pull that one out because that was a good one that I thought everyone agreed on. And then 7 would be give us your view on race and equity. But no, that was my answer. But 7 would be the diversity question that you just posed from the list. So that'd be 7 questions.
So we have one about the decision-making process, and then we have one that's what would you do to fully understand the process? Because the one that didn't make the cut that I still feel was very important was the one about regional partners.
I mean, I did suggest that question, so I don't mind. I mean, the commission's question, I honestly, I really love the way the question is structured, but it does, I mean, when you're talking about 3 most pressing concerns, you are also asking about like what issue areas are important to you. So we might be able to structure, when you say what's your 3 most pressing concerns, or issue areas that you want to, tackle in the city, and that might accomplish the goal, and we might be able to get rid of the commission question and then add the regional partner question. George, does that make sense from what I'm saying? And Lisa, I'll get to you in 1 second.
It does to me. It's now, is there a question that's already written regarding regional partners? I think that there was, right?
Yeah, I had written one beforehand. Again, very open to suggestions on it. But really quickly before I read that, I know that Lisa just raised her hand, so I want to get to her before I read the regional one.
Given our short time with the candidates, with regionalism, we can all pretty much predict what the answer is going to be from anyone, right? Everyone's going to support regionalism and say essentially the devil's in the details. But I think, regional cooperation is, given that pretty much everybody's going to answer that one the same way, we could probably scrap it. That's my thinking. I'm getting disagreement. So, okay, that's good too.
It's a great question. If the answers aren't going to vary, if it's not going to be informative to you, then
yeah,
I mean, that's a legitimate point.
Yeah, no, I understand it, and
but
I take
that doesn't mean I'm right. So
no, I take that point on the nose, and I
wonder if they would be the same, but I guess we would only know that after interviewing 13 people and seeing what they said. So
true.
Well, so if we had that question in there, what our questions would basically be, hold on, and I'm writing this down.
So I have one more that I want to throw in just to.
Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. I just want to make sure.
Okay.
Okay, so right now, what I have on the table is tell us about your background, education, work and volunteer experience as it relates to serving as a council member for the city of East Lansing. What drove you to apply and what makes you want to serve? What are your 3 most pressing, or what do you believe are the 3 most pressing concerns for the community or issue areas that you would like to tackle during your appointment? The question on regional was, what steps can the city take to strengthen its partnership with regional stakeholders like Michigan State University, City of Lansing, Ingham County, Lansing Township, Meridian Township, and other community partners? A question on budget and public finance, and a question on the decision-making process, as well as the question on equity. That's what I have so far. Jesse, go ahead with your next one.
So I guess I'm discovering that I'm the micro level council member during this discussion. But that's fascinating. The other thing that I don't necessarily see addressed in the questions that we've already answered, which I see the value of asking broader questions, especially when we've got limited periods of time, because the answers will be informed by the individual that we're trying to get to know.
Sure.
But to me, I'm trying to like project post-COVID. I know that doesn't exist yet, but I think the economic landscape of East Lansing is going to be very different 18 months from now than it is right now. I think we are going to lose a lot of small businesses. And so some sort of economic development question would not be out of place, because functionally speaking, that's going to be a focus of their term, whomever we appoint here. So I think, well, the chamber suggested one, but it's kind of vague in that I don't feel like it would get to it. Supportive of policies for economic growth, business development, and job creation. I mean, everybody's just going to say yes, right? So
we're all for that.
Yeah. So maybe, asking them if they have a strategy of economic development, or if they have some sort of, I don't know. And I think this is too micro.
So, no. I understand what you're saying. I mean, we could do, because we have a specific question on budget and public finance. I mean, we could do a specific question outlining, what is your experience with managing budgets or public finance, or, economic. I know that they're not the same thing, and I know that they're kind of completely different realms of things, but, in some ways they do inform each other. We could have a question that is, structured as, what's your experience with budgets and public finance and issues of economic development in communities, and kind of.
Yeah, I think combining them offers the candidate the option of answering one part and leaving the other on the table, which is a little problematic.
Sure.
So let's see. We've got budget and public finance. We've got the personal.
A quick thought is perhaps the question on economic development, future looking, what's your views on it, is more relevant than budget and finance, because public sector finance is not something many people who are citizen council members have experience with.
True.
So it might be you might get more from an economic development question of what they want to see from an economic development strategy than
economic development strategy. I like that.
I agree. So,
yeah, I'm okay with that as well. And I just want to point out, actually, I had a conversation with our auditors this past week where we had besides the initial conversation about the audit process, we actually had a conversation about going through what is a training that actually Councilmember Gregg and Babcock went through when they were originally elected to the council, but for whoever the new people are. So that way they would have some info on public finance, what a budget process is for a city. And they actually committed at that meeting to work with myself and the city manager to get that done for whoever the new council members are as well. So, people could, really get a training beforehand on that. And I don't remember how long it was for you guys, but we indicated several hours of that. So unfortunately, again, that conversation about time commitment is going to be real there. As well, I had a conversation with some MML folks about doing, they usually do trainings for large groups of individuals, but given the circumstances in East Lansing and the need to kind of hit the ground running with new council members, I asked them if there was any possibility of doing somewhat of a personal, a one city training, right? Just for us to talk about like OMA issues, Robert's Rules of Order, how to serve on a city council. So there's another side note that I didn't mention in my public comment, but Lisa, go ahead.
I'd take both of those again. Actually, I paid pretty good attention during each of them, but I'm sure I could benefit from taking them again. Skipping. One thing, do we want to leave room at the end for a follow-up question? Or my all-time favorite news reporter question, is there anything I haven't asked you that I should? Which all kinds of answers come forward with that. So that may be human resources inappropriate. Sorry, Mr.
It's actually a good question at the end. Is there anything we haven't considered? If there's time, because then if there's something they really want to talk about that they didn't get a chance to talk about, that's a chance to say it. I don't know how much time we would have for that, but what I put for economic development was, this is just a thought for you, is what is your vision for economic development in the city of East Lansing? So just asking people, What do they want to see? What's
Yeah,
the future look like?
Yeah,
next
that
year?
seems great. That speaks to small business. It speaks to, rental properties. It speaks to development. I think that it's broad enough that they can kind of insert their, I like it. I think it's good.
So really quickly, Lisa, before have you talk, George, can you run us through what we've got right now?
Yep, I'll start over. Tell us about your background, obviously the education experience and all that, and how it relates to the position. Why do you want to serve on the East Lansing City Council? What are the 3 most pressing concerns facing the city of East Lansing? If asked to serve as a liaison on boards and commissions, what 2 would you select and why? What is your vision for economic development in the city of East Lansing? What would you do to fully understand important East Lansing community issues before undertaking council action? And then the 7th one was the question on diversity. Let me get to it. Hold on. What do you believe is necessary to intentionally address issues of equity and inclusion within our community, and how does your past experience inform your commitment to this area? And then if we do have, you could put the final one, is there anything we haven't asked you that you'd like to share? That gets to 8 questions. 7 questions is, if people are tight in their responses and it's 3 minutes or less, they can get to all of them. So.
Okay, do we think that that's doable, folks on council? Lisa, go ahead.
I think that's doable. I think perhaps if we could condense that first question and introduce it with, we've seen your resume, we've seen your application. Can you tell us how those experiences will relate or will inform, so people don't lose time talking about things that we already know?
Sure.
Yeah, I think the background and why do you want to serve is really related in this case. So I think maybe a consolidated question in that, like, why are you interested in serving? Why did you apply to be a city council member in East Lansing? And, how does your background, what will your experience bring to that role?
Yes.
Well, okay, so hold on. I'm gonna make sure.
Sometimes if you
I agree, by the way.
they might not answer, they might only answer one part of the question. If there's a 2-part question in there, it's just
Yeah.
and again, the introduction, a lot of the people who are watching may not have seen the introduction or have a chance to read the resumes, but so do you want to combine and say, tell us about your background as it relates to the position of East Lansing City Councilmember and why you applied? Is that what you
I'm
want
guessing, what I'm thinking is, like, we probably don't need to ask them why they want to serve. I mean, they want to serve because they want to serve, right? Like, I mean, I think we can.
In fact, if we just go to, what would you like to accomplish on city council? I think we get clearer answers there. We know they want to serve.
Yeah,
We know they're committed
that's
to
fair.
public service.
So scratch, why do you want to serve, and say, what do you want to accomplish on what you plan to accomplish or hope to accomplish?
Yep. Trying to recreate the door knocking interview.
Makes sense.
Who are you? Why are you on my porch? And does my dog like you?
So George, run us through for the 19th time. What are our questions right now?
Tell us about your background and experience in education as it relates to the position of city council.
Yep.
What do you want to accomplish while serving on East Lansing City Council? What are the 3 most pressing concerns facing the city? If asked to serve as a liaison on boards and commissions, what 2 would you select and why? What is your vision for economic development for the city of East Lansing? What would you do to fully understand an important East Lansing community issue before you undertake council action? And then what do you believe is necessary to intentionally address issues of equity and inclusion within our community? And how does your past experience inform your commitment to this area? And then if there's time at the end, we could just put the one at the end saying, is there anything else you'd like to share with us or anything we haven't asked? And then if they're out of time, they're out of time. If they have time, they can say it because they were concise elsewhere. So do you want to add the last one that Councilmember Babcock suggested?
Yeah, I do like that question. Maybe we can have a structure where I feel bad about like trying to time people during those, but just to be like fair to people, I wouldn't want to like ask that question of one person and not ask it of another. You know what I mean? Go ahead, Jesse.
Just thinking back to the campaign, we all participated in forums where we had timed amounts of time to answer questions. So if we want to keep this going and make sure that everyone has an equal opportunity to answer all questions, we certainly could time them, and I would not feel bad about that.
Yeah, and it
Can we
also.
give them? Oh,
Sorry, go ahead. Nope.
go ahead. Could we use the timer countdown?
I think you should, just because it gives everybody a chance to say that they got the same equal time in front of everybody. And if
Okay.
someone takes 40 minutes, it throws your whole schedule off, but also it may seem to be an advantage for that person who got to speak for longer and give
Right.
more robust answers. So,
Yeah.
and, you know, the job maybe of council members, sort of as an interviewer, I try to just get the question out there and ask the question as succinctly as possible so that the time is to listen to them, not to me talking. It's to hear them.
Yeah,
talk.
I think we are all going to have to limit our chattiness and just
Give them-
only ask the questions and give
Ask
no
written.
verbal feedback.
Yeah.
so that they can get the full time to answer their questions. Exactly.
Yep. Okay.
No
That
caffeine
makes a lot of
before
sense.
meeting.
I think we have questions written down that are done in the right way. This did take a little bit of time, but I think it was cool. I mean, again, we're having a conversation where, oh, Emily, did you have something?
I just wanted to add that right now with the way the Sign Up Genius is set up for the candidates to sign up for their times, is that it's set up for a 25-minute time span with a 5-minute buffer between each of them. So I think if that helps with the timing of everything, then that might be a good thing.
Yep.
That makes sense. And I think that 3-minute time frame basically puts us at, for 8 questions, that puts us right on the margin, which makes sense to hopefully give a little bit of time in between. It might be rubbing up on 27 minutes per interview just because take time to actually read the questions, but I think that makes sense. As just a random comment, when we get to the interview process, if we could have the timer there but not make it full screen, just so we can see folks and I can make sure that I'm seeing the folks that are actually being interviewed. That'd be super great, because I know that we normally do that, and sometimes honestly just as a personal thing, it does screw me up to not be able to see individuals.
Yeah, we'd like to see their faces. I don't know how to share a screen and not have it be full screen, but
I don't know either. If there is a way to do it, that'd be great. If not, then that's okay. I understand that this is a long process.
We also could do at the end, just say there's 2 minutes remaining or something like that, as we give a 2-minute warning or a 5-minute warning, and not do the clock, because typically in interviews, you don't have a clock in front of the candidate, and just express it's 25 minutes timed. You need to be reasonably succinct. We'll give the questions and we'll try to get through the whole questions, but we'll get through as many as we get through, and at 25, the interview's over at that point.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but I do think that what you had said earlier about actually timing the questions, I think that makes sense. And I think that if we can.
I didn't intend to time the individual questions because we're going to be, I don't know how we would do that. It would be too.
yeah, I was kind of suggesting that we time the individual questions so that so each candidate has the exact same amount of time to respond to the exact same questions. I don't know how to do that. And it definitely, it's weird for a job interview, but this is a weird job interview. So
they still would have the same time. It's just everyone would have you asking the question. So basically when you sit down and start, you say, we have 20 minutes. The interview starts now, 25 minutes. You read the first question succinctly and quickly. They start answering. Everyone will have the same amount of time to answer its entirety, because each of you can be reading questions. So as long as you get to the next
encourage
question.
them to kind of self-time and like keep track of how long they're taking for their answers, knowing that there's a limited amount of time, so that they.
It'd be a good thing for someone to put their own phone in front of them and see what their time is. But
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with the Mayor Pro Tem. I would like to see the questions individually timed. If we can't do that logistically, then when we send out these questions and the interview slots to the candidates that we're going to interview, if we could put there the suggested answering time for each question is 3 minutes.
Yeah.
To just like to be as clear as possible, that we want to get through all of these, and this is the time limit. But I would like to see if we can individually time questions.
the only problem would be, and I'm just trying to envision it, I don't think we're going to be under 30 minutes for the questions. If we give everyone 3 minutes of stop timing, start timing, stop, start, I don't think we'll be anywhere near 30 minutes. I think it'll extend beyond that. That would be my worry. But Yeah, I just don't think it's going to work on.
I do think we should definitely adhere to the solid 25-minute stop time though, because otherwise it's not gonna get through it. And we don't want to have, somebody in the middle of the day run long and then the first person be like, well, I thought I only had 25 minutes. I had other stuff I wanted to say and this guy got 40. And so that doesn't work. We've got to really hold people to the same amount of time.
That's fine. And this is why we have an open conversation about it. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Adhering to that, but I would like to, if we can, suggest to them directly.
Question per answer.
Yeah, that way they know that that's what we're looking for in terms of timing on answering questions, and it would also get them to the point where they could answer everything. Okay, George, do you have clear direction on that?
I believe I do. So we'll make the list and we'll send it out as soon as the meeting. Well, not as soon, but when the meeting is completed.
Okay, awesome. And is there going to be a release sent out by staff kind of after this on what the questions are? And
just to the applicants, but not a release at night. We don't have a release prepared at this point for this.
Okay, well then, if possible, could we maybe have something on this agenda posted after that? These were the questions that were decided on.
Yes.
That way, at least if somebody asks me, well, what are the questions you're going to ask? I can say, go to this agenda item. That's where it is.
Yep.
Okay. Awesome. Lisa, did you have something?
Yeah, sorry about this. When we looked at the charter for the requirements for holding office, that gave us certain requirements. However, as I'm sure Attorney Yaden is aware, there was a state constitutional amendment in 2010 that changes that. And I am 99% sure that this is not going to affect any one of our candidates, but it did put in place a constitutional requirement that if someone has violated the public trust within the past 20 years, has a conviction for that in the past 20 years, they cannot serve. I feel absolutely remiss that we didn't mention this. I'm also 99% sure that it's not going to be an issue, but perhaps Attorney Yaden could advise us as to how to proceed, having not warned people of that before they applied.
Frankly, I'm not familiar with that provision, so I'd have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
All right, that's fine. If we could get an answer to that, I think that'd be great. And hopefully, if it is an issue, then it inform our decision moving forward. Thank you for that, Councilmember Babcock, and thank you for that, City Attorney Yaden. Okay, is that the last point on this item? Okay. So the next item on the agenda is discussion regarding appointing council members to negotiate the city manager's contract renewal. So I had put this item on the agenda with the support to put it on the agenda from Councilmember Babcock. And I wanted to speak to it a little bit, and then I'm hoping to take a little bit of action on it tonight. We are not voting on a contract or anything like that today, but there is a process for what my intention and what my hope is that we can extend the city manager's contract into the future. And to do that, we would need to initiate some type of negotiation. Now, me personally, I would not want to vote on anything like this before new council members are appointed. I definitely wouldn't want to have them vote on something like this at their first meeting. So this would be kind of a first step in this process. But I would, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit, and I won't make a motion until we have a little bit of discussion on this from council members. But, I do support our city manager, and I want to see continuity and some stability going forward. And I think that he has done a great job. And I also think that there are some contract issues going forward and that we need to address. And so I want to see, I want to initiate negotiations on this renewal and extension, see where we get, and then hopefully bring something back to the full council. But I wanted to talk about it today rather than like later on down the line, because we can talk about this in public right now. It's not a shock to folks when it comes down the pipeline later, if we do come to some kind of agreement between myself, between the city manager and individual members of council. So basically how this has been done in the past is two council members would go and negotiate, not in a quorum, but in a session with the city manager. go back and forth on different items and issues. And then, you bring it to the full board and you have discussion and you have an open vote on that. My suggestion is myself and Councilmember Babcock are part of those negotiations and instigate that with the city manager, with the goal being an extension of the contract. So that is what I'm putting out there and pitching to council members at this point. And I'm looking for reactions to that before I make a motion.
I'm fine with it.
Councilmember Babcock?
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I'm not, it's the beginning of a conversation. That's what I'm terming it as. So I'm not unhappy with Mr. Lahanas. I think we've just had a lot of change in short order. And in some cases, change in short order speaks to continuity. And in some situations, some of us are inclined to hunker down. So there we go. But we'll start the conversation. I'm excited about that.
Okay, well, then I will make a motion that this council appoints myself and Councilmember Babcock to initiate negotiations with the city manager on his contract for an extension of that contract. Does that make sense to those on the call? Tom, I'm looking at you, if that makes sense as a motion.
Yeah, that's a proper motion.
Okay, good to know. I will look for a second for that.
A second.
Okay, it has been seconded by the Mayor Pro Tem. Is there any discussion on this matter? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Lisa, one more time. I barely couldn't hear you.
Aye.
Okay. All those opposed, same sign. All right, seeing none, that motion passes. And that leads us to the end of the agenda. I will take another point of personal privilege to say the caliber of candidates, and I've said this literally 3 times this meeting, was and is incredible. This is going to be an extremely difficult decision, but I knew going in that our hard decision was not going to be out of lack of qualified candidates. It's going to be out of abundance of qualified and passionate candidates. And so this is going to be really, really hard moving forward. I think we have our work cut out for us, and I'm looking forward to those interviews. I'm looking forward to doing it in public, and I'm glad that we could have this meeting. Even though it might be a little bit out of the ordinary to go back and forth on questions and our opinions on different things and who we want to interview. I think it's important. I think it's important that the public sees that process. I think that, it's important that, you don't just have like a list show up and you wonder, hey, how did that happen? Right? How was that decision made? You see it right here. Might be a little bit awkward and we might have gone back and forth on wording, but it's important. And this is a really, really big decision that we have to undertake that normally the citizens of East Lansing would undertake. So doing it in public is everything I want to do. So I'm happy that we got through this. I appreciate staff's commitment on this. I will speak again to the fact that the clerk's office is helping us out with a heck of a lot of meetings during, a week before the election. And so, just a big kudos to them and their staff and kind of everybody that's making this happen and going along with the ride for us. I'm optimistic about the future of East Lansing. And I think that those candidates and their qualifications should show that, because we are really going to move this city forward in a positive direction. We got a lot of really big challenges coming up, but I'm excited. And whoever those new council members will be, I know that we're going to hit the ground running and they're going to serve the city of East Lansing in the best way possible. So I'm excited. I'm looking forward, and I'm happy to do this process with the public in its eye. So thank you very much, everybody. That is the end of our meeting. Oh, go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
Go team. I think it's going to be great. Whomever is chosen in this extremely difficult thing, I am going to be proud to serve with them. So we're gonna get it done.
Go ahead, Councilmember Babcock.
Likewise, and I would, just reviewing my notes here, the two of the committees that I liaise to, Transportation and Commission on the Environment are looking for members, and I see some superb candidates. I'm sure that's true of other commissions. So folks, please go and look at our openings, because all of you have something to offer, and we'd be lucky to have any one of you. So
Second that, absolutely. All right, thanks
Absolutely.
everybody for chiming in, for attending. We will see you tomorrow at 5 o'clock, correct, City Manager?
Correct, 5 o'clock.
5 o'clock to begin those interviews.
Yep.
Be done.
Looking forward to it.
night. Thanks, folks.
Bye.